All right, today we're going to be talking about the Facebook advertising policies. And I know this is not the most entertaining subject in the world, but if you stick with me today, if you follow along with this, you're going to be able to get all of your Facebook ads approved. Every single time you post an ad, you're going to be able to get it approved because you're going to be able to avoid the things that get you in trouble and possibly banned from advertising on Facebook. They're actually a little bit more cut and dry than you probably think, although there is some nuance and there is some borderline stuff. So I'm going to actually walk you through the policies, show you what you can and can't do, where the hard lines are, and then give you some examples of some of that borderline stuff where you might be able to push the edges a little bit, if you use the correct content or context, not content, if you have the right context for certain words, for example. So we're going to get into that all in this episode. Hope you enjoy. Okay, so the first thing that I want to do with you is I want to take you to the advertising policies on Facebook. So we're going to go ahead. I'm going to share my screen here. So if you go up here and go facebook.com/policies/ads, it's going to take you to this page that I was already on, but I wanted you to know where to go. And the very first thing that I want to show you is at the very bottom where it says things you should know. And I want to point out two very specific things, okay? The first is these policies are subject to change at any time without notice, right? So it's very important. This is where we're at today going into 2020, what it looks like, but they do change these things frequently and they tend to sometimes, they'll start to crack down on certain areas, right? So like right now they're cracking down a lot in the fitness space and the online business make money type space. The other thing I want to point out is this whole, we reserve the right to reject or approve your ads for any reason. That obviously, if they don't like your ad, they can reject it, even if you think that you're following the policies. I've had that happen before. All right. But the really important thing is including ads that negatively affect our relationship with our users. Now, this line about the relationship with the users is incredibly important because you need to think big picture about what Facebook's primary goals are. Okay. So goal number one, and maybe this isn't goal number one, but it's the one that's most obvious, I think, is that their goal is to make money through advertising. That's how Facebook's making their money. They have the most powerful advertising platform in the world right now, and they make money by you advertising on their platform, spending money, and hopefully making money for yourself. But, okay, the more important thing, so really the real number one is the user experience. They want their users to have an incredible experience. And so even though you spending money on ads is the lifeblood of their business, it's more important to them that the user have a good experience, because if the user doesn't have a good experience, ads aren't going to work and they can't make money from advertisers. And then here's the other secret that you need to understand is that Facebook does not care if you advertise on their platform. If you are not what they consider to be a good advertiser, they will ban you, and they don't care because there's enough advertisers out there. And because of that user experience thing, which is their true number one goal, they only want the good advertisers to be on their platform, right? And they are starting to struggle with this real estate problem where they only have so much room, so much inventory for ads on their website, and they're trying to find new things. But an easier way for them to keep ad costs down is to just ruthlessly eliminate the poor advertisers, the bottom 25%. Okay. And they keep cracking down, getting harder and harder to use. But what that means is that the people that know these policies and follow them and are good advertisers, costs are still going to be good for them. They're going to be successful. So if you want to make money producing these ads and you're not going to put the effort into it, like to comply with the policy and put out a good experience for the other user, you're never going to be successful because you're probably going to lose your permission. So that's a really important thing, is understanding the give and take between those two, sometimes conflicting objectives that Facebook had. Now, I want to take you back to the policies. We're going to spend a good amount of time in these today. So let me zoom back out and let's go all the way to the top. And before we dive in, in here, well, one, you can go here to this overview, and I think it's really interesting to look at these common points of confusion, like ones that people really get confused about. And we're going to go into specifically this personal attributes one here later, but I think that's worth looking over. The ad review process. And no, I'm not going to go through every single. I'm going to go through the really important ones, the ones that most people screw up. That way you can just get, the 80-20 rule, right? The 20% of stuff that's really going to give you the 80% of results. But you need to understand this ads review process, because I think this is really confusing. People look at this and they're like, my ad got approved and then it got rejected. What is happening? Why is this happening? The reason that's happening is because they're using artificial intelligence to review everything at first. And it's the same reason that why more experienced advertisers like myself might get ads approved almost instantly, whereas new advertisers, it might take a day or so to get approved. And it's because they're using AI. And because of that, if you have a proven track record of following the policies and producing good ads, they're going to approve you quicker. They're going to give you the benefit of the doubt. All right. And if you're new, they're going to check it a little bit more closely. But it's a computer that's looking for keywords and phrases and things like that that are in the policy, approving it at first. Okay. And that's why you're going to see when I talk about some of the nuanced ways, like the copy of what you can talk about, that certain things will get approved and others won't. So in the fitness business, this is a really, really good example. If I were to say lose weight, ad rejected. If I were to say lose fat, probably rejected. If I was going to say drop fat, which is the same concept, ad will get approved. But if I was to say drop weight, weight is the trigger word there. So there's that nuance that the word fat isn't actually the trigger, whereas lose weight and weight itself can be a trigger. But it's about context, right? Where saying fat can be okay depending on the context. If it's just talking generally about this thing that is fat versus talking about a person being fat or a person losing weight, right? So context matters, and that computer at first is just checking to make sure that you're not getting the obvious stuff. But sometimes you're going to slip things through the cracks, and then a human is going to come by and they're going to reanalyze things, which is why sometimes you might have an ad that's running for a while and then it gets retroactively rejected. Or even more frustrating, maybe you've had ads that have been running for a long time, or as I've seen many times where you have ads that you ran a year or two ago and then they're not even being used and they get retroactively rejected. And then, maybe your account goes down because so many got rejected at once. I've had that happen before too. Luckily, you can get out of that. And honestly, if you want to know more about what to do if you're in that situation where your ads were getting rejected, your account got disapproved, I want you to watch this video that's all about how what to do if your ad account gets disabled. All right, it'll be super helpful. It's actually a long training where we go through the different methods, like what you need to do, what you need to say to get your ad account reinstated, and what to do if they refuse to reinstate it and you got to start from scratch. All right, so check that out. So the next thing I want to look at is I want to start looking at this prohibited content, okay? And prohibited content is what is the stuff that's going to get your ads rejected. You can see it right here. It's a little different from restricted content. If we were to go down to restricted content, you're going to see things that you're allowed to advertise depending on laws and restrictions, okay? So you're going to see things like a really good example would be if you talk about weight loss, right? Ads marketed for weight loss must be targeted to people 18 years and older, okay? With cryptocurrency, it needs to be approved. You need written permission. That's usually just going to get disabled. It's not going to be allowed. So restricted financial products, that kind of thing, there's usually regulations and things. So there are situations where it's not always rejected, but sometimes it is. So you want to read up on that. But what I want to focus on more is this prohibited content. So there's some really obvious stuff here, like illegal products and services. You don't want to do any of those things, but I want to focus on some more, some that are less obvious or more common, that way you can get the most out of this. So first off, don't discriminate. I feel like that one's pretty obvious, but discrimination does not necessarily, it doesn't have to be like an overt discrimination. It can be talking about and pointing people out based on, different characteristics. And we're going to talk about that a lot more when we get down to personal attributes. So I'm going to save that for that. But things like drugs and drug related products, a big one that comes up is going to be, a weed, CBD, that kind of stuff. These, you can't promote these things. They're not allowed. Whatever your feelings are about it, whether it should be legal, shouldn't, it doesn't matter. It's not allowed right now. And even if you live in an area where certain things are legal, it doesn't matter because Facebook is a private entity. They can make their own rules and they aren't going to allow it. Okay. So let's get down. You can read through all of these. Obviously, don't steal other people's stuff. Don't do adults, anything adults, weapons. This can go as much as like you can't use like fake guns and stuff. It's very difficult to advertise something like that, even like a toy gun or something. But more common ones, right? Sensational content. Sensational content, right? Things that are going to be very shocking, disrespectful, could offend somebody in some way. Maybe it doesn't offend you. Maybe it doesn't offend your target demographic. Okay. But the people that will potentially see it could be. And this is really key when we talk about Facebook wanting a good user experience. They don't care if what the average person would think. They care about what anybody on the other end of that could think. So you need to be looking at your content from the perspective of, is this thing potentially going to offend somebody? Or is this thing potentially going to create a negative user experience for someone on the other end? And if it is, it's either going to get rejected, or maybe not rejected, but it's not going to perform well, and Facebook is going to charge you more to run that ad. Now, a really, really big way that this ties in is these personal attributes, okay? And you see this a ton, especially in the fitness space, but you can also see it in the business space, but definitely in the fitness space, where you are talking about a person's personal attributes and it's having, an impact on what they're doing. So like if you're talking about weight loss, right? If you're talking about getting in shape, that sort of thing, you are talking about the personal attributes of that person, right? They're not healthy, they're overweight, they want to change their body, they want to transform their body, whatever it may be, okay? And you have to be very, very careful, because this stuff is just straight up not allowed by Facebook. So you have to be careful how you do it. All right. You also need to be careful talking about sexual orientation, gender identity, any kind of disabilities people have, financial status, right? That's a big one as well. You see that, like in the personal finance space, if you're talking to people about retirement, things like that, you can see that coming up, especially in the business world. If you're trying to teach people how to make money, how to start a side hustle, online business, that kind of thing. Talking about a person not having money in any way, shape, or form is going to get you in trouble. All right. But I want to dive in. Facebook's got a really good thing here where they delve into what is good and what is not good for personal attributes. So the key here is that you need to focus on your product or service, not the person on the other end, even if your product or service is aimed toward a specific group of people. All right. Now, there's certain ways, as you'll see, that you can actually show this is for a certain group of people, but you need to talk about the group collectively in a non-discriminatory way, right? That's why discrimination and personal attributes are separate. You can talk about the group collectively, and you're going to see examples, but you can't talk about that person or make the assumption that they are part of the group. Okay. And so what you're going to see here, like here's a good example. Start with race, right? Meet Hispanic men online now, okay, versus meet other Black singles near you. All right. So the use of the word other, you are making the assumption of the personal attribute to the person on the other end. So if it's saying meet Hispanic men, it could be anybody that wants to meet Hispanic men. But if you're saying meet other Black singles, you're saying you're a Black single. You're pointing that person out. You're calling out their personal attribute. And you can't do that. The other thing to keep in mind, and well, here's another example, right? Find Black singles today, where you're doing the same thing. The message gets across. The other person on the other side, if the attribute is appropriate for them, the message is going to come across, but you're not individually calling them out. So another way that you see this is the word you, and using the word you a lot. And this isn't actually going to be here directly in the policy, but we've seen it time and time again, and we've heard Facebook representatives talk about not doing this. When you use the word you too often, you're running the risk of calling that person out. Okay. And so a key thing for this that we see in ads a lot of times is you might say in an ad, are you looking to blank, right? Are you looking to start a side hustle, right? That you're putting that attribute on the person of them wanting a specific thing, or them desiring a specific thing, or them being a specific thing. Okay. But if you drop the you and it was just something like ready to start a side hustle, okay, now you've changed it. You've made it okay. Because instead of you saying, hey, are you ready to start a side hustle? You're saying ready to start a side hustle, and you're not calling that person out. But because of the English language, the you is implied. And so sometimes you need to think about things like that. These examples here for race versus the one that's not allowed, the you is implied. Okay. And that's what you need. You can't call that person out. You can't say, hey, have this problem. Or do you have this characteristic? Or do you want this thing? Do you desire this thing? Okay. So be very, very careful with your use of the words you. All right. Next, same thing, religion and philosophical beliefs. Here's an example, right? Are you Christian? Right? Versus date Christian singles, meet other Buddhists, looking for Buddhists near you. Even this one, the you is there, and so they're saying that this would be approved, but, I will say it would be, I wouldn't be sure because of how they've started to tighten down on that use of the word you. All right, age. Meet seniors, a service for teens, meet other seniors. Once again, that word other getting in the way. Car insurance for 18 to 24-year-olds, right? That is different than, because it's specifically calling out a group. Now, man, you know what? This is a tough one, right? A service for teens. If this had said car insurance for teens versus car insurance for 18 to 24-year-olds, I'm having a hard time seeing the difference here just based on what I know. Like, I'm surprised they have this one as one that would get improved. So you got to think about this. And sometimes you're going to put something out there and it's going to get rejected. And you're going to go, oh, what did I do? And then you need to come back and see, you can look at these and go, oh, okay, I said other, or I said you, that sort of thing. In the fitness space, one of the things that we do all the time, and we do this in the make money space, in the online business space as well, is instead of saying, do you deal with this or struggle with this or have this issue? Instead, we talk about a client, right? My client, Julie, was dealing with boom, boom, boom. Okay. And then we helped her achieve blah, blah, blah by doing blah, blah, blah. Okay. We can do the same thing for you. Like, it's that concept of like, instead of saying, do you have this problem, here's how we'd fix it. You'd say, somebody came to us and they were like this and they struggled with this. And so we did this and this is the result they got. And the person on the other end, if the targeting is right, they can relate to that story. And so you can convey the same thing without calling out their personal attributes. More examples: sexual orientation, sexual behavior, are you gay, meet other lesbians, compared to Atlanta's gay cruises, gay dance clubs, all of these kind of things. Same gender identity, disability. Do you have diabetes? You got to be really careful with medical stuff. And I want you to think of it from this perspective. And let me back out of here for a second. When you're talking about health issues, you got to remember people's paranoia about the data that Facebook has on them, the information they have about them, and the targeting capabilities. All right. So Facebook's always dealing with this, and there's a lot of restrictions in place, and it's really rather harmless because even if I'm targeting with you with an ad, I don't know who the person is that I'm targeting at all. I'm just saying I want people that are like this. So one of the big reasons they don't want you doing this personal attribute stuff is because they don't want people having this negative experience thinking Facebook is sharing stuff about me, my health conditions. So if you have, say, a fitness program and it's like a health and nutrition program for people with type 2 diabetes to help them, whatever. If you go out there and say, do you have diabetes? The person on the other end, there's two things that could happen. They could go, no, I don't have diabetes. Like, what the heck? And then they're closing it because it's not relevant. And that's hurting your ad performance and giving you negative feedback, which is then telling Facebook it's a bad ad, right? Or they do have diabetes and they're offended. They're upset because they're like, how do they know I have diabetes? Why are they calling me out? How is this ad? They're targeting me based on the fact that I have diabetes. And that's not what you're doing, but that's how it can come across. And it's super negative. And remember, user experience is the thing that really, really matters. So you want to make sure that you're not doing something that creates a poor user experience by calling out a condition like that. And health conditions are one of the worst ways that you can do that because it's such a sensitive issue and such a serious thing for those people, right? So you got to be really, really careful. And that's just a great example of, things not to do in the personal attribute thing, right? Same thing here, financial status. Are you broke, bankrupt? Check out our services. We need financial services to cover every financial, we have things, whatever. A really, really good example of this is student loans, right? So I had a lot of student loans. I went to law school. I've been very fortunate with my business to be able to pay off my student loans. You know, when I made my last student loan payment, I paid off $135,000 in student loans that I had left all at once. And I was fortunate to have the money saved up in the bank to do that. My wife and I said, let's get rid of this instead of making payments, and just paid it off, right? But that's not the case for most people. And I know that. And I know, you know, Bobby here at Laptop Empires, his other brand, Millennial Money Man, you know, they do a lot with student loans, paying off debt and that sort of thing. And so if he's running ads for any of the services that he recommends for people that are trying to pay down their student loans or refinance, that's a big one, right? Student loan refinancing. He has to be careful because he can't say, do you have student loans, right? He's calling on a personal attribute, specifically financial status, right? But he could say such and such offers, you know, student loan refinancing to cover every situation, any amount of student debt, whatever it may be. Okay. But that's very different than calling out the person, right? And it has the same effect. It's just wording and fitting into what Facebook is categorized. Because remember, they said they can reject it for anything. And they've given us guidance where they say, this is okay, this is not okay. You got to follow that. All right. All right. So that really dives deep into personal attributes, which is one of the biggest ones that we see. All right, now before we move on from personal attributes, and just a reminder, these are prohibited content. These aren't, you know, that's why you have to word it so specifically, because these are things that are not allowed. And we're going to get into more of them, but I want to go to what I call kind of like Facebook ad no words. And this is actually, you know, this is for the fitness space, but I think it'll give you kind of a good example of the spirit of the law, so to speak, right? So I gave you these guiding principles that are about, you know, Facebook's desire to have a good user experience. And now you've seen some of these policies about personal attributes that really can talk about everything from the person's race to their appearance, their age, or sexual orientation, all of these things. And so I want to show you fitness as a great example of this, right? And so you can see here, these are just words that are going to get your ads rejected because they are either talking directly about a person's personal attributes, or they are going to fall into that category of bad user experience. Okay. And so you're going to see things like fat loss, lose fat, lose weight, weight loss without the, you know, the space here, get in shape. These are all common fat loss words, like dieting words, things you'd see in the fitness space. And a lot of people in the fitness space, when they advertise, struggle because they are harder on the fitness space than other industries, that in the make money space, for good reason. There's a lot of scams and there's a lot of negative feeling type stuff in there. But they go, oh, I can't say these things. Like, how can I describe it? And there's so many other ways to do it. You just have to be more creative. And it helps to think about the words and the things that your clients are saying, and even telling stories of clients, like I mentioned earlier. But these are straight no-nos, right? Like, these are things that you say, they're going to slap your ad down because you're talking about that person's personal attributes. Now, the other big thing is, if you want to be clever and you want to use numbers and symbols, we'll see this here a little later, but I'm going to give you a clear example. If you were to put a 1, right, or a capital I that looks like an L, or an exclamation point, or you're doing something to kind of make it come across where you're saying the word without saying it, using symbols is not permitted to get around the advertising. Now, this word fat I mentioned earlier, it's about context, right? Like, if you were sharing like a scientific study or content and you were talking about fat as a substance, right, in a scientific way, that's not going to get rejected. And it's the same way you can kind of skirt the edges by, you can't say reduce fat, right, or weight loss, because these things have been flagged. But saying something like drop fat, you know, if you were to say drop weight, that one's been flagged, right? But drop fat hasn't, for whatever reason. So that can be something to get around it, right? But there's other things that you can do. You can describe the thing that you want to achieve, right? So I remember one of my clients, one of his big things, he talks about getting shredded without cardio. And he's using the word shredded as a general term for, which basically means different things to the person on the other end, but it means losing weight, having a six pack, having tone, being more defined, like getting that physique, right? Without cardio. And that's the extra part of his, overcoming an objection, part of his shtick or his hook. All right. But shredded works. So you might have other things where you can talk about terms that your audience is using that aren't these things, like getting, that are just going to get rejected, right? So for example, think about stuff. How do people describe stuff, right? Like a lot of times, and you can't call out gender, right? We said that you can't, gender is one of those things. It's a personal attribute. You can't talk about it, but you can use words that might appeal more to one gender or the other, right? Getting shredded, right? That concept of building muscle, defined muscle, that is going to be more appealing to men. So maybe you're not calling out men specifically, but when you do your targeting, you select men and you use those words. You're talking to women, you might talk about boosting the metabolism, toning up, not getting bulky. These are things that people, your ideal customers, are talking about. They're the terms they're using, and they don't violate any of the things in the personal attribution, the personal attributes that we're not supposed to be using in ads. Okay. So it is not only better advertising because you're using the words your prospect is using, they're going to get approved by Facebook. All right. Next thing, when you start talking about stuff that's really related to fitness, about looking better, you're going to make somebody feel bad, like they don't look good, right? So saying slimmer, sexier, that stuff can be a problem, Then there's other things like emotional things, right? If you are in copy, a lot of times we're taught to use emotion because sometimes pain is a bigger motivator. So I want you to look at these things, right? Are you fed up? Do you have low self-esteem? Are you angry, depressed, ashamed, frustrated, deprived? Are you embarrassed, distraught, unmotivated, unattractive, disgusting, ugly, deformed, failed? Like, well, I mean, that one's, wow, that's way out of nowhere. You might not say ugly, but I think some of the things that you're going to see a lot, like in that fitness space, is, are you frustrated? Right? Do you suffer from low self-esteem because of this? Like, are you depressed with what it feels like wearing, your clothes don't fit, right? Are you embarrassed to go out in public in your bikini? Like, these kind of things that are coming up all the time in this marketing, they're the stuff that's making people feel bad and creating a poor user experience. And if it's not getting your ads rejected right out, it's increasing your CPM, which is how much you pay for 1,000 people to see your ad. So think about that. If you have a CPM of 10 and then they don't like it and they make it 20, now you're paying double for the same amount of people to see your ads. Your ads are more expensive. So it's really important that you're creating an ad that's a good experience for the person on the other end, not necessarily playing on those pain points and things like that. And so Facebook advertising copywriting is very different than other copywriting, because if you're doing a sales page, you might play on all of those things, but you're not having to be compliant with a company that's totally focused on user experience. Your goal is to create that pain, really ramp up that pain, make them really feel it, so that way your solution is more powerful. But you can't do that with your Facebook ads, okay? Now, I want to go back and I want to wrap up some more of this stuff by, going through the different thing, these other prohibited pieces of content. Okay. And so let me go back and let's scroll through. All right. So here's some other big things, right? Misinformation. Okay. You need to be very careful about the facts you use. If they've been debunked, something, this really comes out a lot in political debate and that kind of thing, or people are, hey, this is, or studies, they found this, but that's not necessarily the case, or it's up for debate. You want to stay away from that kind of thing. Another related topic that we see all the time I keep coming back to the fitness space and the make money space. And the reason is because those two are so restricted. But time-bound promises, okay? You've got to be very careful anytime you make a statement that is time-bound, all right? And a really good example of this, if I were to put out an ad in the fitness space and said, using our system, you are going to be able to lose 5 pounds over the course of 5 years. That is 100% achievable by anybody. But the problem is, even though it's a completely reasonable statement, anybody can lose 5 pounds in 5 years. Anybody can lose 5 pounds in a year. Because it's time bound, Facebook says you're making a claim that's not achievable for everyone, right? And where you really see it is people making stuff like learn how to go from 0 to 6 figures in 90 days, right? Learn how to lose 10 pounds in 60 days. 10 pounds in 60 days is pretty reasonable as well, but it's not achievable for everyone. Now, a lot of that has to do with, did the person follow the plan? Do they have any other underlying health issues? There's all kinds of factors, but it doesn't matter because our guiding principle is user experience, right? And are people going to believe it? Okay. You see this a lot with case studies as well. If you're sharing a story about somebody who achieved something that might be just seem crazy, right? Even, whether it's really crazy or not so crazy. We had a student come into my Facebook side hustle course, and within 3 weeks, he had landed 2 clients. And so he was making $2,000 a month within 3 weeks of joining the course, right? Pretty awesome and totally doable if you're putting in the work and you're getting a little lucky, right? But if I were to go and put something out about that, there might be people that are like, what? No, that's not possible, right? Or, but at the end of the day, whether they feel that way or not, Facebook's going to say that's not allowed. Same thing. If somebody came in and they gave this whole story, it was like, I nailed it with this one funnel and I made $300,000 off of a single webinar in a 2-week period. People are going to be like, yeah, right. Like, I'm not sure if that's real. And maybe it really is real, right? Like, so it could be real, but it doesn't matter. Time-bound promises, not allowed. And that's a big one. That's like one that a lot of people mess up by making those kind of claims. Non-functional landing page. This is really big, right? And if you go here to learn more about non-functional landing pages, there's some things I want to point out to you, okay? Let's see. This is a big one. Landing pages that don't match the product or service promoted in the ad. This is big. This is one of the reasons why you really want your headlines on your landing pages to match your headlines in your ad or to show continuity. We like to use, if we have an ad image, we want a similar ad image or at least related, if not the same one on the landing page, because we want people, when they click on the ad and the page loads, that they know they've come to the right place. And if it's too far disjointed, if Facebook believes, and they're looking at this, but if they believe that it doesn't match, they're going to reject your ads. They're going to shut it down. Other things that are really important here is sending people to Facebook groups or to facebook.com, right? So one of the things you may not realize is you're not allowed, it's not even possible to run ads directly to a Facebook group. So if you created a traffic campaign to run traffic and you put a Facebook group in there, the ad, they won't even let you publish it to get it reviewed. It's just not allowed. It's not even possible. And so some people try to get around that. They create a landing page and they put a button and then that button goes to the group. You might get away with it at first, but it's not allowed. So be careful to make sure you're not doing that. All right. Let's look at these last couple items. There are some big important ones that we want to talk about. So yeah, profanity and grammar. Don't use profanity. And remember, I said symbols, numbers, and letters using properly. You just don't be trying to circumvent the ad process, okay? Same with non-existent functionality. This is a big one. If you're creating images that have a play button like a video, how there's like that slightly transparent play button, like it can start a video. If you have an image and you put that button, because they're saying, well, you're trying to trick somebody, is if they click that image, they're going to get thrown into the ad, to the landing page. It's a click on the ad. You've tricked them. The other thing that you can't have that's non-existent functionality is like arrows. You can't have arrows that are pointing at the button or anything like that. Big one, before and afters. They're listing this under personal health, but this can be anything. This happens in the business space as well. You cannot have before and after images in your ads. It is not allowed. Don't try to get around it. Don't try to use slideshows where you have one image before, one image after, or carousel ads where one's a before image and one's an after image. They catch on to it. This can get you in trouble. Don't do it. And before and after images also apply to different things, different businesses. So if you have like first they were here and then they were here, they had no money and now they've got all this money, that's not allowed. And you can see here, contain unexpected or unlikely results. It doesn't matter how likely the results are. Remember how I was talking about that? 5 pounds over 5 years, totally possible. They're going to categorize it as unlikely or unexpected or not attainable, because results may be attainable for the average person, but they're not attainable for everyone. So you got to be very, very careful with that. And it's important to know that this applies to not just your ads, but themselves, not just the copy, but also the images, the videos, and the landing pages where you're sending them to, okay? Another big one, multi-level marketing, okay? Multi-level marketing, this is huge. It's not allowed, okay? And it doesn't matter what space you're in. If it's an MLM type company, it is not allowed, right? And so we see this all the time in my Facebook side hustle course. People are like, hey, I've got a friend that runs, I don't know. I don't even know most MLMs, but they sell this kind of makeup or this kind of supplement or essential oils or whatever. Those are multi-level marketing companies and they're forbidden. So you cannot promote those and you will get in trouble for it, okay? You can also get in trouble for things that take on that appearance of multi-level marketing. And so this is the biggest obstacle we face at Laptop Empires is we're teaching people how to build online businesses. And if we get too much into talking about making money, then they say, oh, that's MLM, even though we don't have any kind of multi-level marketing product at all, even to the extent of not offering affiliates in, programs in certain cases to prevent that appearance, right? We're very careful about that. So that's something you got to watch out for. All right. So the last one that I want to show you is, we just talked about multi-level marketing. I want to talk about misleading claims. Ads must not contain deceptive, false, or misleading claims like those relating to the effectiveness or characteristic of a product or service, or claims setting unrealistic blah, 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 health, employment, weight loss. So you can see, really, we see this a lot with the fitness space and the business space, okay? So if you go to learn more here, they're going to use some examples. What is it? And I talked about some of these exaggerated claims, tips, or tricks. And this doesn't necessarily just have to be exaggerated, right? It's just almost like anything that could be perceived as unbelievable. Unrealistic results with specific timeframes. I already covered this pretty thoroughly. Cures for diseases, false or misleading claims about product attributes, quality, functionality, setting confusing or misleading expectations for delivery times, all this kind of stuff, okay? And so the big thing here is, just remember, it doesn't matter whether you're actually being deceptive or misleading, right? Like that's the big thing here, is that you might not be deceptive. You might not be misleading. You might be sharing a real story, actual facts, things that you have done, right? Another way you see this is talking about your own story, right? Like talking about things you've done. I mentioned earlier in this video, paying off $135,000 in student loans as my last and final payment to get rid of my student loans. That's true. That actually happened. If I were to talk about that in an ad, it would likely get deleted or rejected, because it's almost unbelievable. It's crazy, right? And there was a lot that had to go into that. I had to save a bunch. A business was making good money. I had that money in the account and whatever, but it doesn't matter. They might not believe it's real. It's the same thing when you see somebody talk about their business, something they've done, right? The very first weekend that we launched the Facebook Side Hustle course, we did almost $150,000 in sales. We had never sold the product before. We'd never sold anything under that brand before. And we launched it and it crushed. And if I was telling that story, that might be considered deceptive or misleading, even though it is factually accurate and it actually happened. Okay. So you got to be really careful with that. And it just all comes back to the main theme of like the user experience. Okay. So it doesn't matter if you're promoting something in the fitness space, in the business space, your main goal is, how do I help this people? How do I give them something that can be helpful without making them feel bad, without it seeming like an over promise, or, even if you feel like you can deliver on that promise, you need to be talking about really the features, the benefits, the product or service itself, and how it's going to help people without getting into some of those things that are in the prohibited content. So now you've gone through this, you're like, all right, Mike, I understand the policy so much better, but I've already violated the policies. What do I do? I want you to watch this first video that is about what to do if your ad account gets disabled, what actions to take to get it reinstated, or if it's not getting reinstated, what actions you need to take to be able to start advertising again. Then the more common thing, I want you to check out this other video that's about how you can improve your ad performance in 10 minutes or less. And it's a system that I use for analyzing ad performance and optimizing it, making small tweaks to be able to get better results. So check those out, subscribe to the channel. We got new videos every week helping you grow your business. See you next time.